Hey guys, it's ETA Prime back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Xiaomi Redmi Note 8 Pro. This is an amazing mid-range handset with some awesome gaming and emulation capabilities. I'm actually pretty blown away by this device for the price I paid on it. And before we get started, I do want to mention that this is actually powered by a Mediatek CPU. Personally, I'm not a big fan of Mediatek because I haven't found a really good chip from them that performs well. But I have to say, the chipset they're using in this new Note 8 Pro is absolutely amazing for the price. And speaking of price, I picked this up on Amazon for $218 with free Prime shipping. And I chose the green version, but if you went with, let's say, the black version, you could get it for $215. And this is the GSM fully unlocked version. It'll work on T-Mobile in the USA or any other GSM network. So inside of the box, you're obviously going to receive the Xiaomi Note 8 Pro, an 18-watt fast charger, USB Type-C cable, and a clear silicone case. They do offer a few different variants and colors of the Note 8 Pro. I chose the 64GB model with 6GB of RAM, and obviously I have the green version here. It does have a fingerprint sensor on the rear and a quad camera setup. Plus, there's a 20-megapixel shooter on the front. The Note 8 Pro only has a single speaker setup, but for the price I'm not complaining, and it actually sounds really good. We also have USB Type-C for charging in sync, plus a 3.5mm audio jack for your headphones. Over on the right-hand side, we have our volume rocker, power switch, and moving to the right-hand side, we have our SIM card/SD card tray. So this is touted as a mid-range handset, but after using it for a while, the build quality and performance really makes it feel like a flagship phone. And after putting this thing to the test for the last few days, I'm having a hard time justifying paying $800 to $1,200 for the flagships like the S10 or even the higher end gaming phones, knowing that I can get quality and performance like this for $215. It actually blows my mind that they were able to do this. So moving over to the specs, for the CPU, we have the Mediatek Helio G90T. This is a 12nm CPU, Octa-Core, 2 A76 cores at 2.05 GHz, and 6 A55 cores at 2 GHz. For the GPU, we have the Mali-G76 MC4 at 800 MHz. Couple different variants of these rolling around. One with 6 gigs, that's the one I have in this video. There's also an 8 gig variant. And as storage goes, the 6 GB variant will have 64 GB of storage. And with the 8 GB variant, you can get 128 or 256. But all three of these do offer a micro SD card slot, good up to a 256 GB card. The display is a 6.53-inch IPS LCD at 1080 by 2340. Awesome brightness, great colors, and it's super clean. A built-in 4500 mAh battery with 18-watt fast charging capabilities, 802.11a BGN and AC Wi-Fi so we can pick up that 5 GHz network, Bluetooth 5.0, and a GPS built-in. It's running Android 9.0 with MIUI 11, and there are plans to upgrade to Android 10. And the camera system on this is pretty phenomenal for the price point. On the rear, we have 4 different cameras, a 64-megapixel camera, an 8-megapixel, a 2-megapixel, which is a dedicated macro camera, and another 2-megapixel camera, which is a dedicated depth sensor. Unfortunately, this will only shoot 4K at 30 FPS, but it'll do 1080p at 30, 60, or 120, and 720 at 960 FPS, and it does offer optical stabilization. Around front, there's a 20-megapixel selfie cam, and it'll shoot 1080p at 30 FPS. If you really want to see how these cameras perform, I'm going to leave a link in the description to a video by Alan Palander. He's done a lot of work with this phone and the cameras on it, and he really shows off what the camera system on this thing can do. So like I mentioned, this is running Android 9.0 with MIUI 11. They do plan on updating this to Android 10, and hopefully that's coming soon. It did take me a little while to get used to MIUI because I'm so used to just running regular stock Android, but overall it functions really well and the interface is super fast. I haven't noticed any lag in anything that I've tested except for some higher end emulators, but all the games that I tested from the Google Play Store function properly and they're running at full speed, and we'll get into that in just a second. But first up, I did want to run some benchmarks and see how this thing stacks up against the Snapdragon 855, which is one of the main chips that's being used in flagship smartphones as we speak. The first benchmark I ran was Geekbench 4. This is a very CPU intensive test. We're not testing out the GPU here. Single core 2465, multi 7654. I was actually really impressed seeing this 7654 in the multi-core side because like I mentioned at the beginning, I've tested a lot of Mediatek CPUs and I've never seen any performance out of them like this here. Just to give you an idea, I also ran this on my Galaxy S10. I paid about $850 for this phone. Single core 3493. Multi-core 10,954. Obviously, the Snapdragon 855 in the S10 is more powerful than this device here, but I don't think it justifies that gigantic jump in price. Next on the list, we have 3D Mark running Slingshot Extreme. This is a GPU intensive test. For OpenGL 3.1, we scored a 2,369, and for Vulkan, a 2452. On my S10, for OpenGL 3.1, 5587, for Vulkan, 4711. Now this is where we're seeing a gigantic jump from the chipset inside of the Note 8 to the Snapdragon 855. OpenGL was more than double the score of this device here, but you got to keep in mind that a lot of the Android-based games that are going to take advantage of the GPU aren't taking full advantage of the Snapdragon 855 chipset in the first place. And finally, the Antutu benchmark. This is Antutu 8. We scored a 280,248 on my Galaxy S10 with the same version of the app, 385,433. All in all, yes, the Snapdragon 855 is a much more powerful chipset than the Helio G90T. But remember, I paid $218 for this device. My S10 was $850. So is getting the extra performance out of the S10 worth the $632? In my opinion, I really don't think so, even when it comes down to the camera and different capabilities of the S10. Now it's time to get into a little bit of native Android gaming. So first up, we have Asphalt 9 Legends. We're just going to start light here and then we'll move on up. Everything that I've tested has run flawless on this device, and I've been able to max out all the graphic settings as long as the game supports it. Another game I've been playing a lot lately on Android is the King of Fighters All-Star. Now I know this isn't a super intensive game, but I am maxed out here. And on a lot of my other lower-end devices, I do notice a lot of stuttering when there's a lot of characters on screen and you're pulling off these moves with all the special effects going on. But I haven't noticed any stuttering or low frame rates on this device. Another one that's running perfectly on this chipset is Call of Duty Mobile. Now I do have this maxed out, we'll get into the settings in a second. I just went into a little bit of an AI battle just to show you how it performs. But I am set to very high with the frame rate set to high, and everything is super smooth here. Same thing with PUBG Mobile, I've been able to max that out. I'm not going to show it off in this video, but I do have one last one that I want to get out of the way. I know a lot of people will want to know if it'll run on this device. And that game is Fortnite. Runs great. Unfortunately, we can't go to 60 FPS, and that really comes down to Epic enabling this device in their settings to allow 60. But I do have 100% resolution scaling on, set to high and 30 FPS. It runs great. I personally think that this would run at 60 FPS, medium settings, if they enable it on Epic's end. And since this natively supports controllers, I figured I'd break out the Sataki 7007X controller here. As you can see, the phone fits perfectly in this device, and this is my favorite mobile controller at the moment. I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested in checking this thing out. But overall, this will handle anything from the Google Play Store at maximum settings. So now it's time to move over to my favorite part of these videos, emulation testing. First up, we have some PSP emulation using PPSSPP from the Google Play Store. I am at 3x resolution with this. This is Tekken Dark Resurrection. I also have the FPS listed in the top right hand corner, and I'm using an Xbox One S controller. PSP performance with this device is absolutely amazing. Usually with these lower cost Android phones, I'm not able to run God of War Chains of Olympus or Ghost of Sparta at full speed. But this is handling it at 3x resolution, and we're getting a really nice 60 FPS frame rate. Now given every once in a while there will be a little bit of choppiness, that's just textures loading in, and that's how these harder to emulate games go with this PSP emulator. I personally still see the stutter on the Snapdragon 855 Plus, which comes in the higher end gaming phones like the Asus ROG Phone 2. So overall I'm really impressed with the PSP performance on this chipset. Next up, we have some Dreamcast emulation using Redream from the Google Play Store. I am upscaled to 1920 by 1440, and it's running amazingly. This is Canon Spike running at full speed, and the FPS is listed in the top left-hand corner. And of course, I had to test out some Marvel vs. Capcom 2. It's pretty awesome to see this upscaled to 1920 by 1440 on a $200 phone. It's running great here. And finally, we have some GameCube emulation using the Dolphin emulator. This is Automodalista. Now, this is one of the harder games to emulate using an ARM chip, even with the Snapdragon 855 or the 855 Plus. I'm only getting around 42 to 45 FPS, so I was sure it wasn't going to run at full speed, but I just wanted to check out the performance. But not to worry, this chipset does handle Dolphin quite well with a lot of other games. This is Soul Calibur 2, and I'm actually using the OpenGL backend. I did test Vulkan, but when I switched it over to OpenGL, it worked just fine, so I left it there. Along with the 3 GameCube games you're going to see in this video, I also tested out Super Mario Sunshine and Super Smash Bros. Both of those also run at 60 FPS. Of course, there are some games that just aren't going to perform well, like you saw at the beginning here, Automodalista, and I'm sure we'll run into some other ones. But overall, for a $200 device, this is one of the best values for mobile emulation that I've found so far. And after seeing the performance of the emulators that I've tested in this video, I will be doing a dedicated emulation video using this phone because it is such a great value at $200. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. I really appreciate you watching. This phone has totally blown me away from the build quality, screen, camera, and performance. The phone itself is definitely in my top 3 for 2019 and going into 2020, and the Mediatek G90T chipset has kind of got me changing my mind about Mediatek in general. As long as they continue along this path, they're going to be a big contender to look out for. So if you're in the market for an inexpensive Android device, I can definitely recommend this. I'll leave a link to where I got mine in the description. I'll also leave a link to Xiaomi's website so you can check this out a little more in detail. Don't forget to keep an eye on the channel because I do have a full emulation video coming up. And if there's anything else you want to see running on this phone or chipset, just let me know in the comments below. But that's it for this one. It'd be really cool if you could hit that like button or maybe subscribe to the channel. But like always, thanks for watching.